Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker.
All right, everyone, welcome to episode 41 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts, Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Prime Minister Suga has halted all non-resident business travel to Japan.
Subaru to halt domestic output for 2 days due to chip shortage.
New Japanese Lagar beer to hit shelves despite misspelling.
This week in Japan.
So our first story, Prime Minister Suga has halted all non-resident business travel to Japan.
On January 13th, the Japanese government announced that it will suspend entry of all non-resident foreign nationals, including business travelers from Taiwan, South Korea, China, and 8 other designated countries.
This is a sudden change in course because as recently as December 28th, Prime Minister Suga had opted to retain business travel, indicating that people from designated countries and regions would be allowed into Japan as long as the new coronavirus 2.0, which we will hereafter refer to as Strong Zero, were confirmed in those places.
The Suga administration has now performed an about phase and abruptly shut down this entry method. Even so, this decision is already being criticized as coming too late.
Suga announced the suspension of business travel from the 11 countries at a news conference stating, "To eliminate all risks preventatively, I have decided to temporarily suspend entry while the declaration of the state of emergency remains in effect."
Suga's announcement was followed by a succession of criticism from fellow politicians, commentators, and angry internet shitposters, saying that the government's action was late and that the Prime Minister was handling the situation reactively instead of proactively.
We will follow up on this news in detail later in this episode on our Japanese Politics Wow segment.
Next up, Subaru to halt domestic output for 2 days due to chip shortage.
Kyodo Newswire has reported that Subaru said that it will temporarily halt production at all its domestic auto plants following a reduction in the U.S. output due to a chip shortage, as tight supply has hit the global auto industry.
Subaru said it will halt output at its assembly and engine factories in Gunma Prefecture on Friday and Saturday. The company has already slowed production at its plant in the United States state of Indiana,
which is currently on fire. The combined output at its Japanese and US plants is expected to be reduced by several thousand vehicles this month from its initial plan, the company said, adding it will consider whether to cut output further from February onward.
Subaru manufactures about 700,000 vehicles annually at the Gunma plants and is assessing the production halt's impact on its earnings in the current business year through March.
Global automakers are dealing with the shortage of chips, which are used in many vehicle components such as engines and braking systems, due to the growing demand for chips for smartphones and 5G network equipment.
Toyota Motor has also decided to slash production at its facility in Texas. Honda Motor said that it plans to cut output by around 4,000 vehicles per month in Japan from this month and stop production at its plant in Swindon, England for 4 days next week.
Nissan Motor will also reduce the output of its Note compact model by several thousand units this month at its plant in Kanagawa Prefecture, southwest of Tokyo, and may continue to do so in the following months depending on the supply situation.
So there's not enough chips to go around, apparently.
Is this just a chip thing or is this a coronavirus thing?
It's hard to say, obviously, because of 5G and all of these new technology devices. I mean, everything has got so much technology in it, including cars. I mean, I saw something a while ago comparing the amount of wiring in a car from 30 years ago compared with a car of today, and it's something like 20 or 30 times.
Wow.
It's insane how much technology is in these cars, and if the technology stops working, the car will not work. So having these chips and this technology is really key to making these cars work. So no chips means, I guess, it just doesn't make sense to even make the cars.
And 5G is just ruining everything.
And Al Gore is controlling our minds. Or is it Bill Gates?
One of the two. But
They're probably both doing it at the same time.
5G terror.
Get out of the way, Bill. I'm going to control the minds now.
No, Al, I'm gonna control the minds.
More on that later.
In other news, sales of tinfoil have gone through the roof.
And up next, new Japanese Lagar beer to hit shelves despite misspelling.
Kyoto has also reported that a new Japanese beer will hit the shelves next month despite a misspelling on its logo as Lagar. That is Lagar instead of Lager, which is the correct way to spell lager. You would think that its maker, Sapporo, would have known this, as it has been brewing beer for about 200 years. But apparently this error has slipped their minds, and as a result, it has set social media on fire. And in the end, consumers said overwhelmingly that they don't care, as, you know, they still want to drink the beer, right?
Oh, for sure. I wouldn't doubt it. Did you see when Budweiser changed its name to America? They only did this in Japan. But I thought it was awesome. I'm like, hell yeah.
Bust open a can of America.
You know what this country needs? Needs some more America.
Give me some tall boys of that America, boy.
I remember telling my friends in the States about this, and I'm like, do they ever do that kind of marketing stuff? And everyone's like, no. You know? So many consumers shrugged off the major brewer's logo mistake on the limited edition cans instead of having printed the correct lager.
So several Twitter users made comments about this, including,
Who cares? It's too good to throw away.
while another tweeted that, why not sell it as a super limited misspelled edition?
Yeah, no doubt. That's what it's going to become.
You know, I when I saw this, I was pissed off because it sounds really good. They're like recreating this, one of their original recipes. So and they said that they were going to just not do it at all, and they were just going to throw all of the cans away.
Oh, wow. So the beer was initially slated to go on sale on January 12th. Sapporo Breweries said a last-minute inspection before shipping found the incorrect spelling on both the 350 and 500 milliliter versions.
The company caused a stir online after announcing last week a halt to sales of the product.
It is said the new beer uses the same traditional manufacturing methods as that of Kaitakushi Brewery, Japan's first beer factory, opened in 1876.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, it does.
So, buoyed by all of this consumer support, Sapporo Breweries reversed its earlier decision and released a statement on January 13th saying that it has decided to proceed with sales of the beer as is.
While acknowledging the typo, they said, there is no effect on the quality.
Damn right. So this beer, which was co-developed with convenience store operator Family Mart, will be sold from February the 2nd with a tax-inclusive price of 219 yen for the smaller version and 286 yen for the larger one.
It'll be available at Family Mart convenience stores offering liquor across the country.
So Aaron, you gonna get some of this Lagar beer?
Yeah, why not try it out?
I think people are already saying that this is gonna fly off the shelves because it got so much free PR.
It's funny. So they have an exclusive. It looks like they're just doing Family Mart first, right?
No, it's Family Mart exclusive. It's because it was like co-developed. So you have to buy it at Family Mart.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, you know, I think most foreigners in Japan, we know Family Mart is like the place to go, right?
I'm a 7-Eleven guy, but I think everyone has their own favorite conveni.
Family Mart has a lot of conveniently located convenience stores across Tokyo that seem to garner a lot of foreigners outside, like in Shibuya, places in Roppongi and whatnot.
Well, I think we all go for that sense of family, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and also the chicken, like the famichiki, is so popular.
I'm just shaking my head. Yeah, it's so good, man.
I mean, on Twitter very recently, there were all these people talking about famichiki, and there were also people who don't like it saying that they had actually muted it as a word on Twitter. So whenever someone mentioned famichiki, they wouldn't have to see it.
Yeah. No, I think the fried chicken at Family Mart, some of the best fried chicken in Japan.
I think Colonel Sanders is going to put a hit on you now. Speaking of foreigners loving convenience stores, there's another podcast out recently called Konbini Boys.
I saw this somewhere on Facebook floating around.
Yes, but I'm here to tell you, listeners, they suck. Don't listen to them.
All right, and up next on Japanese Politics Wow, we'll be talking about Suga's decision to halt all business travel to Japan.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave. Japanese politics. Wow.
So, a recent Mainichi article gave an in-depth look at Suga's tough decision to halt all business travel and what it says about the current domestic political environment in Japan.
The now temporarily suspended business travel consisted of a residence track and a business track that enabled business travelers and technical intern trainees from China, South Korea, Vietnam, and other countries to travel between their countries and Japan.
So this business track applied to 4 countries, which were China, South Korea, Vietnam, and Singapore, while the residence track applied to these countries and also included, in addition, Taiwan, Thailand, Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, and Myanmar.
On December 28, 2020, following the discovery of a new and reportedly very infective coronavirus strain in countries including the UK, the government announced that it would, in principle, suspend new entries into the country by foreign nationals, but it continued to allow business travel under the 2-track system.
So why didn't the government also suspend business travel at that time?
An unnamed member of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, who previously served in a senior government post, surmised to a Mainichi reporter that
Mr. Suga didn't want to give up on accepting technical trainees. He was accordingly reluctant to go ahead with suspension.
Accepting technical trainees was a policy that was developed and heavily promoted under the administration of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. It was also a pillar of economic revitalization to alleviate Japan's labor shortage, and figures in the business world and agricultural industry made strong requests for the measure's continuation even during the pandemic. Even more importantly, it was Suga, during his tenure as Chief Cabinet Secretary under Prime Minister Abe, who led the way in getting the trainees accepted.
So technical trainees were being accepted into Japan under the residence track on condition that they remained isolated for 14 days after arriving in Japan. Vietnam supplies the highest number of technical trainees to Japan, followed by China. LDP Secretary General Toshihiro Nikai, who supports the Suga administration, has strong connections with both countries. Some within the LDP have said that Suga may have focused on retaining business travel out of consideration for Nikai, who was reluctant to suspend it.
Nikai, who as Secretary General is the second LDP top official after Prime Minister Suga, who also serves as LDP president. He's also a power broker with considerable influence within the party. Nikai is also rumored to be hedging his bets on whether to continue supporting Prime Minister Suga as 2 key elections loom later in the year.
Recently, a weekly newspaper reported that Nikai is eyeing the possibility of reneging on his support for Prime Minister Suga and instead championing the candidacy of Seiko Noda in the upcoming September LDP presidential election, Well, that's crazy. We're going to have another election in September. It's going to come really soon.
Well, the thing about the election is that actually Prime Minister Suga, when he assumed the post as LDP president, did it for the rest of Prime Minister Abe's term. Also, it's important to remember that the person who is the LDP president is de facto Japan's next prime minister as long as the LDP stays in power. So the LDP's continuing majority support itself will also come up for a referendum soon. Suga could call a lower house snap election at any time, and it has to happen sometime before October 21st of this year, when the current House of Representatives term of office expires. Also, there are a couple of important dates this year, and this is going to be an interesting year for Japanese politics. First of all, on July the 22nd, the term of the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly expires. Then, the next day, July 23rd, is the date that has been decided for the opening ceremony of the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. That is, of course, if they end up actually happening.
Right. 6 months away. Right.
Exactly. And then on September 30th, just 2 months later, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga's term of office as president of the LDP expires.
Wow. So it's going to be a very busy couple months right there.
Exactly.
Potentially losing the Olympics and losing his position of power.
It all depends on what happens in the next coming months.
Hey, full vaccine rollout by April, right?
Yeah, I think this is actually something that the top brass within the LDP, and especially the Prime Minister, is gunning for, because a fast vaccine, you would think, would lead to higher approval ratings. And of course, those higher approval ratings would lead to Suga being the person who the LDP decides to keep supporting, and then, of course, will roll into a hopefully successful lower house election.
Right.
But the exact opposite is also possible.
Yeah, no, for sure. So with that in mind, it's worth pointing out that the Prime Minister is strongly hoping that the Olympic and Paralympic Games go ahead this summer. I mean, it's a must at this point, right?
And his job might depend on it. So when it comes time to accept athletes into Japan for the Games, the government is considering applying the business track entry scheme, which exempts people from the quarantine requirements following their arrival if they meet certain conditions, such as submitting a plan of their activities. But if the business track is temporarily suspended, it could affect Japan's preparations to accept athletes. Furthermore, it could heighten concerns about staging the Games in Tokyo at all.
So after coronavirus infections began spreading in Japan, there were suggestions to suspend business travel in line with the issuing of a state of emergency. But while the government did declare a state of emergency for the 4 prefectures of Tokyo, Kanagawa, Chiba, and Saitama, it didn't suspend business travel.
On January 8th, the day after the state of emergency was announced, Suga said on a TV Asahi program, "We will go ahead with an immediate suspension if there is even one case of the virus variant in the community of the country in question." Suga also asked for understanding regarding the continuation of business trips. Additionally, the government announced that Japan would require proof of a negative coronavirus test from business travelers within 72 hours of departure, and also another test at the airport upon arrival in Japan. This was effectively taken as a declaration of intent that Japan would continue business trips even if it meant imposing tough conditions.
But discontent began to surface within the LDP in the form of calls for stronger border protection measures, which put the brakes on the Prime Minister's moves.
In a meeting of the LDP's Foreign Affairs Division on January the 12th, one participant commented, "When I returned to my hometown over the 3-day weekend, I encountered a stream of criticism, with people asking, 'Why are foreigners being allowed into the country when we are limiting ourselves?'" Additionally, Masahisa Sato, who is an upper house member and a senior member of the LDP, who is also serving as director of the Foreign Affairs Division, commented that, Rather than stopping at the water's edge, we're being submerged. To receive understanding from the public, business travel should be temporarily suspended.
With criticism that Japan's coronavirus countermeasures were reactive rather than proactive, and support for Suga's cabinet plummeting, there was no way to avoid quickly mounting criticism over the continuation of business travel.
At a news conference regarding the suspension of business travel on January 13th, Suga stated that it was not a case of the decision being delayed with the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics in mind. When it came to the reason for the suspension, Suga said that a cluster of the variant strain of the virus from someone who returned from the UK was confirmed, and then a new variant strain was confirmed from someone who returned from Brazil, and due to a spate of such cases, unease among the public has been increasing.
But neither the UK nor Brazil are eligible for the business travel program in the first place. While making infections with variant strains in the designated regions a condition for halting business travel, the Suga administration decided to halt business travel on the grounds of the public's unease.
One high-ranking government official commented to a Mainichi reporter that, with the state of infections in Japan remaining serious, it would be a further serious matter if a variant strain entered. Additionally, a figure close to the Prime Minister's office divulged,
The media has been reporting more and more on the variant strain, and the public sense of fear has risen more than we had imagined.
However, the government's disjointed response exposes the difficult position the Prime Minister is in as public backlash continues. Meanwhile, the sudden change of course has led those within the government to express their bewilderment.
One official from a related government ministry commented that, "Why did the suspension go ahead? I want you to ask the Prime Minister that."
Without going the hyper cynical route, which a lot of long-term foreigners here in Japan go, and blaming this on xenophobia, etc. The bigger issue here, they want to do the Olympics in July. They're canceling these business programs that are supposed to kind of like be a bridge to start getting more people coming in. They're getting spooked by this new strain. The new strain's going to be everywhere, right? I mean, give it a month. They're like, oh, only countries where the new strain is coming from, we're going to block them, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, that's going to be everywhere in a couple of months. There's just no stopping that. I think that the bigger issue here is Japan's not going to be able to transition into a place where it can hold the Olympics in July if we're shutting down all these programs now in January. I mean, it takes so many months to get all this stuff up and running, right?
Yeah, this new strain looks really tough, and obviously it's a lot more infectious, and some people are already saying that it's more deadly as a result.
Yeah.
I think this all comes back to this debate of public health versus the economy. And it's a tough debate because obviously public health is important, but especially for the government and for the citizens as well, the economy is also important. And so how do you maintain this careful balance between making sure infections stay low, but also ensuring that economic activity can continue during this uncertain situation?
We're lucky though in Japan, we just have those two things, right? So we have public health and the economy. In other Western countries now, I think it's public health, the economy, and the problem of mass misinformation or disinformation going everywhere. I think this is an example of people overreacting, to be honest with you, or the government overreacting because people are spooked out too much, right? I mean, I don't see them closing down this business program helping in the long run as far as public health is concerned. If anything, I think it's going to hurt the economy more, and it's going to completely block their runway for the Olympics in July.
This new development definitely does seem like it's going to have a dampening effect on the chances of the games taking place in any sort of normal form. Of course, that does not eliminate the possibility of doing a spectatorless Olympics, but all of the key people have already said that that is something they absolutely do not want to do. So it really puts a big question mark on a whole lot of things around holding the games in July.
For sure. as much as I like to be critical about Japan and laugh like, oh, the Olympics aren't going to happen, I do wish I wish they would happen. To be honest with you, I wish we could see. At this point, man, we've been in like a quasi state of lockdown since last April. I think we're all ready for just some kind of normal to come back, right? Travel to open up in some capacity. It'd be awesome to see an Olympics where there are people in the stadiums and maybe 70% of the people there are vaccinated, and we have that kind of that feeling of safety that would spread across the world.
Like a certain virus?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, already that sentiment puts you at a minority in Japan, because it's been said that over 80% of the public has responded to a survey saying that they do not want the Olympics to go ahead as planned.
Right.
And it's really a big question. I mean, this is the big question that we're looking at this year. I mean, do we have another 6 months of this pandemic? Do we have another year of this pandemic? Is it going to be more than a year? Nobody knows.
I mean, the projections, though, from a lot of scientists are saying that it's going to be a 2 to 3 year pandemic. I mean, looking historically, looking at the Spanish flu in 1920, if we compare it to that, it's going to be 2 to 3 years before things get back to normal.
I don't know why, but every time I hear Spanish flu, I think it's like some cool dance.
Come on, guys, let's do the Spanish flu.
It's like some like flamenco style guitar riff that only like really good guitarists know how to play.
Exactly.
Bro, do you know how to play Spanish flu?
No, man, I could never do that.
Dude, this guy knows how to play Spanish flu.
Oh my god! Get this guy a Lagar.
I am excited about the Lagar. I do want to.
That's the only thing we have to look forward to right now.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's a misspelled beer.
If anything, I'd love to. I wish I had bought the Budweiser America titled beer and just kept one in my apartment just for
every time you
keepsake.
crack it open, suddenly you start hearing like Freebird.
Sound of loud roaring engines.
Is that gunfire? We only use the finest automatic weapons in this country, sir. So, Aaron, do you think Prime Minister Suga will be able to stay in power through this tumultuous year we're having?
I don't think Suga is as dynamic as Abe, and he's much more risk averse. I mean, as soon as Trump won the American presidency in 2016, Abe was the first foreign leader to meet with Trump unofficially in Trump Tower. I mean, whether you like Abe or Trump or not, that meeting takes some real guts, right? And honestly, I have respect. I have a lot of respect for Abe. I know you asked about Suga, but just kind of comparing them, right? I think this year is going to be even more dynamic and require a lot of risky decisions. I don't think Suga is going to be able to react as well as Abe would have. If you asked me, would Abe be able to stay in power? I would have said absolutely yes. But Suga, I don't know. I think things are changing so rapidly too. Like we saw in the US, so many things have changed so rapidly. And the people of the US made a decision to change the entire government in the US, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar pattern here in Japan.
If you had asked me this same question a couple of months ago, I would have said absolutely yes.
Oh, yeah.
Now the case is slightly different, and it does seem like Prime Minister Suga is starting to crack under the pressure of the job. Even at a recent TV press conference that I watched, it just seemed like Suga was extremely fatigued, and it wasn't his normal, I'm annoyed with your stupid questions, Mr. Reporter. It was really more of a, this guy looks like he needs a damn nap sort of fatigue. And that's scary because even when Prime Minister Abe, with his health issues outwithstanding, always seemed to have a certain dynamism and a passion when he was speaking to the public. And already seeing Prime Minister Suga start to fall victim to the pressures of the job, it makes me wonder if he can do this for the long run. At the same time, though, the LDP supporter that I am personally, I think that he needs to stay in power to ensure a solid support base for the LDP, because if the LDP were to change horses less than a year than Suga was given the reins to the job, it would signal a repeat to the revolving door prime ministership that we saw in the disaster that eventually led to the LDP losing its majority and the Democratic Party of Japan's rise to power in 2009. It's also, I mean, maybe this is just happenstance, but it's also hard for me to forget that 2008 was the year that Obama rose to power and inspired the world with his message of it's time for a change.
Right.
And I think that the Japanese public's shift in its solid support for the LDP was also influenced by watching this change overseas. And so with another change happening in Washington, D.C. in another 5 days, if, you know, the entire country doesn't explode in a ball of flames in the meantime, that could also have some sort of a spillover effect.
For sure.
And I mean, by saying this, obviously it has no direct effect on anything. It's a different country, obviously. But when you see all of that reporting in the media, and the Japanese media does report a lot about what's going on in the United States, which makes us look really bad, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
As Americans, yeah.
Especially right now, yeah.
That's going to affect public opinion in a very indirect but significant way, or potentially significant way. Maybe.
No, I guess we'll just have to see. I definitely think this year is going to be even more dynamic. I mean, gosh, man, what's the date today?
It's the 15th of January. I mean, it feels like we've been in this 2021 for like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. I think I feel like it was a month ago. My sister texted me and sent me images of what happened at the Capitol, and she, saying, hey, "Did you see what happened?" And I hadn't seen all that happen, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" That already seems like a month ago, but that was just like 7 days ago. So
apparently, that's what happens when you create a product called Twisted Tea. It's an alcoholic beverage with tea.
Oh.
It's what all the cool kids are drinking these days.
Oh, really?
Apparently, right before they decide to storm the Capitol.
No way, really?
No. So, what's going to happen next? Long story short, nobody knows.
Yeah, seriously. This is so reactive and dynamic right now.
Well, I do know one thing. This is our first episode of 2021 here on Tokyo Wave, and no matter what happens, if we don't die, that is, we'll keep on going. So we look forward to having your continued support throughout the year. We'll try to have a new episode for you on every Friday. And thanks again for your support thus far. And we hope you will keep listening to us here on Tokyo Wave.
Yes, thank you all so much. Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you could subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.